For the fourth year straight, my parents pretended my birthday didn't exist, then posted photos of my sister's new motorcycle. I cut contact that night, and what happened next shocked everyone. My name is Sarah, I'm 25, and this is about how my family's years of neglect led to the most dramatic revenge I never planned. Growing up, I was what you'd call the invisible child. My younger sister Emma was the golden child, captain of the soccer team, straight-A student, homecoming queen, the works. Meanwhile, I was the bookworm who preferred reading to parties, got decent grades but nothing spectacular, and generally flew under the radar. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't jealous of Emma's success. What hurt was how my parents, Linda and Mark, seemed to forget I existed the moment she achieved anything. The birthday thing started when I turned 21. Emma had just gotten accepted to her dream college on a full soccer scholarship. My birthday fell 2 days after her acceptance letter arrived. I came home from my part-time job at the campus bookstore expecting maybe a small celebration, nothing fancy, just acknowledgement that it was my day. Instead, I walked into a house full of Emma's friends celebrating her achievement. There was a banner, a cake that read "Congratulations, Emma," and my parents were beaming as they took photos. I stood in the doorway holding my backpack, watching my family celebrate everything except the fact that their other daughter had just turned 21. When I finally spoke up, Mom looked genuinely confused for a moment before her face went red. "Oh honey, I'm so sorry. We got so caught up in Emma's news. We'll celebrate tomorrow, okay?" Tomorrow came and went. So did the day after that. The second year, I decided to be proactive. I reminded them a week ahead, then 3 days, then the morning of. Emma had just gotten her first internship at a prestigious marketing firm. You can guess what happened. I came home to find my parents posting on Facebook about how proud they were of Emma's professional achievement, complete with photos of the three of them at a fancy dinner, on my birthday. When I confronted them, Dad actually had the nerve to say, "Sarah, you're an adult now. Birthdays aren't that important anymore." This while Emma's 20th birthday 3 months earlier had been a weekend-long celebration with a surprise party in a car. Year 3 was when I started keeping detailed records. I screenshot every Facebook post, every Instagram story, every family group chat message. Emma got her first apartment, and my parents spent my 23rd birthday helping her move and posting about what a milestone day it was for their incredible daughter. The plural was notably absent. I started therapy around this time. Dr. Peterson helped me understand that I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt, that my feelings were valid, and that I had every right to expect basic acknowledgement from my family. She also helped me realize that this pattern wasn't going to change unless I changed it. Which brings me to this year, the 4th year straight of birthday invisibility. I had been in graduate school for 2 years and was working on my thesis while maintaining strong academic standing and working part-time at a coffee shop to cover my expenses. Emma, meanwhile, had decided she wanted to be a travel blogger after working in marketing for less than a year and had quit her job. My parents thought this was brave and following her dreams. 2 weeks before my 25th birthday, I did something different. I sent a group text to my parents and Emma, just a reminder that my birthday is on the 15th. I'd really like to celebrate with my family this year. It's been a while. Mom responded, "Of course, sweetie. We'll plan something nice." Emma replied, "Can't wait," party popper emoji. Dad sent a thumbs up emoji. I felt cautiously optimistic. Maybe this year would be different. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to 17 happy birthday messages from friends, my advisor, even my boss at the coffee shop where I worked. Nothing from my family. I checked Instagram and Facebook, nothing there either, though Emma had posted a selfie from her morning yoga class and Mom had shared a recipe for gluten-free muffins. I decided to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were planning a surprise. I went to my morning classes, then work, then came home around 6 p.m. The house was quiet. I found a note on the kitchen counter in Mom's handwriting, "Gone to dinner. Leftovers in fridge." Mom. That's when I saw Emma's Instagram story. She was at a Kawasaki dealership with my parents, all of them grinning as she posed next to a brand new Ninja 400. The timestamp showed they'd been there for 2 hours, right when they should have been celebrating me. The next story showed Emma signing papers. Then one of her actually riding the motorcycle out of the lot with a caption, "Dreams do come true. Thanks to the most amazing parents ever. #blessed, #new ride, #family first." My parents had commented with heart emojis and "so proud of our girl." I sat on the kitchen floor and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative was screaming. 4 years. 4 years of being forgotten on the one day that's supposed to be yours. And they'd done it again while buying my sister a $6,000 motorcycle she'd probably mentioned wanting once. I took screenshots of everything. Then I did something I'd never done before, I called them. Mom answered on the third ring, engine noise in the background. "Hi honey. We're just helping Emma with something. Can I call you back?" "It's my birthday," I said. Silence. Then, "Oh my God, Sarah, I completely forgot. We got so excited about Emma's surprise and..." I hung up. Dad called back immediately. I declined. Emma called. Declined. Mom texted, "Sarah, please let us explain. We're heading home now." I didn't respond. Instead, I started packing. I'd been staying at home to save money during grad school, but I had enough saved for a security deposit on a small apartment. I'd actually looked at a place the week before, just in case. I called the landlord. Miraculously, it was still available. By the time my family got home at 9 p.m., my room was empty and I was gone. The calls and texts started immediately. Mom, Sarah, where are you? We need to talk about this. Dad, you're being dramatic. Come home so we can discuss this like adults. Emma, Sarah, I'm sorry about today, but you can't just disappear. Mom's crying. I turned my phone off and spent my first night of freedom in my new apartment, eating Chinese takeout and watching Netflix. It was the best birthday I'd had in years. The next morning, I turned my phone back on to 47 missed calls and 23 text messages. I deleted them all without reading them and changed my number. Then I blocked them on all social media and set my accounts to private. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Dr. Peterson had always said that families with these dynamics don't just accept being cut off, they escalate. She was right. It started with them showing up at my workplace. I was working the morning shift at Grounds Coffee when Emma walked in, followed by my parents. I was behind the counter, trapped. Sarah, this has gone on long enough, Dad said, approaching the register like a customer. You need to come home so we can work this out. This is my workplace, I said quietly. Please leave. We're your family. Mom's voice was getting louder. You can't just cut us off over a misunderstanding. My manager, Kevin, peered from the back room. He'd noticed my distress and came to investigate. Is everything okay here? We're her family, Emma said, turning on her charm. There's been a little family disagreement, and we just want to talk to her. Kevin looked at me. Sarah? Do you want to talk to these people? No, I said. I'd like them to leave. Kevin nodded. I'm going to have to ask you folks to leave. This is a place of business. Dad's face went red. This is ridiculous. Sarah, stop being childish and talk to us. Sir, I'm not going to ask again, Kevin said firmly. They left, but not before Mom loudly declared, we raised you better than this, Sarah. They tried twice more at the coffee shop before Kevin banned them from the premises. Next, they found my apartment. I have no idea how. I'd been careful not to give anyone my address. They didn't just knock, they camped out. I came home from my evening job at the tutoring center to find all three of them sitting on my apartment steps. We're not leaving until you talk to us, Emma announced. I called the police. When the officers arrived, my family tried to explain that this was just a family misunderstanding and they were worried about their daughter/sister. The cops were polite but firm, they had to leave the property. This is what you've become? Mom shouted as they were escorted away. Calling the police on your own family? Yes, I thought. That's exactly what I've become. The harassment continued for 3 weeks. They found my graduate advisor's office and showed up there, telling Dr. Martinez that they were concerned about my mental health, asking if I'd been acting strangely. Dr. Martinez, thankfully, reminded them of privacy laws and asked them to leave. They contacted my undergraduate professors whose information they found online. They called both of my jobs. Emma even tried to get information from my former roommate, claiming I was missing and they were just trying to make sure I was safe. But the most invasive incident happened during my 3rd week of freedom. I was at the university library, working on research for my thesis in what I thought was an obscure corner of the graduate studies section. I'd chosen this spot specifically because it was tucked away behind the economics journals, somewhere my family would never think to look. I was deep in concentration when I heard familiar voices. My blood ran cold as I realized Emma was talking to the librarian at the reference desk, which was unfortunately within earshot of my hiding spot. I'm looking for my sister, Sarah Mitchell, Emma was saying in her sweetest voice. She's a graduate student here, and we're really worried about her. She's been going through a difficult time and hasn't been returning our calls. We just want to make sure she's okay. The librarian, Mrs. Patterson, had helped me with research multiple times over the past 2 years. She knew me as a quiet, dedicated student who always returned books on time and never caused problems. I'm sorry, but I can't give out information about students, Mrs. Patterson replied professionally. Oh, I completely understand, Emma said, her voice getting that manipulative lilt I remembered from when she wanted something from our parents. I'm not asking for personal information. Could you maybe tell her we stop by if you see her? We're her family, and we love her so much. We just want her to know we're here for her. I watched from behind the stacks as Emma pulled out her phone and showed Mrs. Patterson something on the screen. This is from her birthday last month. See how happy our family is? We had such a wonderful celebration, but afterward, Sarah started acting strange and now she won't talk to us. We're afraid she might be having some kind of breakdown. I couldn't see what Emma was showing her, but I could guess. Probably photos from the motorcycle purchase, carefully cropped and contextualized to make it look like a family celebration rather than my exclusion. Mrs. Patterson's expression remained neutral. I understand your concern, but university policy is very clear about student privacy. If you're worried about a family member's well-being, I'd suggest contacting the appropriate authorities rather than the library. Emma's mask slipped for just a moment. I caught a flash of frustration cross her face before she reconstructed her worried sister act. Of course, you're absolutely right. Thank you for your time. After Emma left, I waited 20 minutes before approaching Mrs. Patterson. She looked up as I approached her desk, and I saw immediate recognition in her eyes. Sarah, she said quietly, glancing around to make sure we weren't overheard. I think someone was just here looking for you. I know, I said. I heard the whole thing. Thank you for not telling her anything. Mrs. Patterson studied my face carefully. Are you all right, dear? She seemed genuinely concerned, but something about the situation felt off. I made a quick decision. Mrs. Patterson had always been kind to me, and I trusted her discretion. Without going into details, I'm not in contact with my family right now for very good reasons. They've been showing up at my workplace and apartment, and now apparently here. I'm safe, I'm not having a breakdown, and I don't want them to know where to find me. She nodded slowly. I've worked at universities for 30 years, Sarah. I've seen family dynamics that weren't healthy before. Is there anything the library can do to help? We can flag your student record to prevent anyone from getting information about you, including class schedules or study locations. That would be amazing, I said, feeling a wave of relief. Done. And Sarah, if anyone else comes looking for you, they'll get the same response your sister did. Student privacy is something we take very seriously here. That interaction made me realize how insidious my family's campaign was becoming. They weren't just harassing me directly, they were systematically going through every aspect of my life, trying to create a narrative that I was unstable and they were the concerned family members trying to help. It also made me understand how effective Emma could be when she wanted something. If I hadn't overheard the conversation myself, if Mrs. Patterson had been someone more susceptible to emotional manipulation, Emma might have gotten information about my schedule, my research, or my favorite study spots. The incident prompted me to reach out to Dr. Peterson for an emergency session. I needed to process not just the violation of having them track me down at the library, but also the realization of how calculated their approach had become. What you're describing sounds like a coordinated campaign, Dr. Peterson said when I recounted the library incident. They're not just reacting emotionally to your absence, they're strategically trying to undermine your independence and create justification for their intrusion into your life. She helped me understand that this escalation was actually predictable. When someone removes themselves from a dysfunctional family system, the system doesn't just accept the change. It typically tries to pull that person back in, often through increasingly dramatic means. What your family is doing, portraying you as unstable, claiming you need help, positioning themselves as the worried relatives, is a classic manipulation tactic. But what if people believe them? I asked. Emma was so convincing with the librarian. What if professors or employers start thinking I really am having some kind of breakdown? That's exactly why documentation is so important, Dr. Peterson replied. You've been keeping records of these incidents, which is smart. But you might also want to consider being proactive about controlling the narrative. That's when she suggested something I hadn't considered, reaching out to key people in my life to give them a heads up about what was happening. You don't have to go into all the details, she explained. But if your family is going to continue this pattern of contacting people in your life, it might be helpful for those people to have context about what's really going on. Over the next few days, I had some of the most difficult conversations of my life. I reached out to my thesis advisor, Dr. Martinez, and gave her a brief overview of the situation. I wanted you to know that my family might continue trying to contact you, I explained. I've made the decision to cut contact with them for my own well-being, and they've been responding by trying to convince people in my life that I'm having a mental health crisis. I'm not, I'm actually doing better than I have in years, but I wanted you to have context in case they reach out again. Dr. Martinez was incredibly understanding. Sarah, I've been advising graduate students for 15 years, and I've seen family dynamics affect students' work before. For what it's worth, you've been one of my most focused and productive students this semester. Your work quality has actually improved since the beginning of the year. I had similar conversations with my supervisors at both jobs. Kevin at the coffee shop was already aware of the situation from their in-person harassment, but I also spoke to my supervisor at the tutoring center, Ms. Chen. I appreciate you telling me, Ms. Chen said. We did get a call a few days ago from someone claiming to be your mother, asking about your work schedule and whether we'd noticed any changes in your behavior. I didn't give out any information, but I was puzzled by the call. The fact that they called the tutoring center too made me realize the scope of their campaign was even broader than I thought. They were systematically contacting every aspect of my life, trying to build a case that I was unstable. But their persistence was about to work against them in a way they never expected. I documented everything and filed for a restraining order. That's when things got really interesting. 2 days before the court hearing for the restraining order, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, but I was expecting a call from my apartment maintenance company. Sarah? This is Rebecca Chen. I'm a reporter with Channel 7 News. I almost hung up. How did you get this number? I got a tip about a story involving you and your family. Someone reached out to us claiming you've been spreading false accusations about them online and trying to damage their reputations. They wanted us to investigate your lies and expose you for trying to manipulate people with a sob story. My blood ran cold. What exactly are you calling about? Well, I started looking into their claims, but when I dug deeper, I found something else entirely. Your family has been contacting your workplace, your school, your professors, even your landlord, claiming you're having a mental health crisis. Some of these people were concerned enough to reach out to local news, thinking there might be a story about mental health resources for graduate students. I was quiet for a long moment. And? Sarah, I've been a reporter for 12 years. This isn't someone having a mental health crisis. This is harassment. And when I started looking at the social media posts your family's been making. She paused. Would you be willing to talk to me? That's how I learned that my parents and Emma hadn't just been harassing me privately. They'd launched a full social media campaign portraying me as an unstable, ungrateful daughter who had abandoned her loving family and was spreading lies about them online. The problem was, I hadn't posted anything about them online. I'd gone completely silent on social media after cutting contact. Rebecca sent me screenshots. Mom had posted a long Facebook status about how heartbroken they were that I had chosen to believe false narratives about them and was refusing to get the help I needed. She'd asked for prayers for their family during this difficult time. Dad had shared an article about mental illness in young adults, commenting about how sometimes the people you love most are the ones who hurt you the deepest when they're struggling. Emma had posted a TikTok about toxic family members who gaslight you and play victim, not directly naming me, but anyone who knew our family would understand. The most damaging was a post Mom had made in a local Facebook group for parents, asking for advice about adult children who cut contact over imagined slights and painting a picture of a troubled daughter who had always been dramatic and was now trying to destroy the family that raised her with love. But here's where they screwed up. Rebecca was thorough. She found my social media accounts, even though they were private. She could see I existed and when I'd last posted, which was months before their campaign started. She'd spoken to Kevin at the coffee shop, who confirmed their harassment. She'd even spoken to Dr. Peterson, who couldn't discuss specifics due to confidentiality but confirmed that I was her patient and was a very grounded, articulate young woman. Most importantly, Rebecca had found the screenshots I'd taken over the years of their birthday posts and family celebrations that excluded me. Sarah, Rebecca said, I think your family tried to get ahead of a story they were afraid you might tell. But they told it first, and they told it wrong. Would you like to tell the real story? I thought about Dr. Peterson's words about taking back my narrative. Yes, I said. I would. The story ran on a Thursday evening. It wasn't the lead story, but it was featured prominently. Local graduate students' 4-year birthday boycott leads to family harassment campaign. Rebecca had done her homework. She'd found the perfect balance of facts and emotional impact. The segment showed the screenshots of Emma's birthday celebrations next to my parents' Facebook posts on my birthdays. The contrast was stark and damning. She'd interviewed Kevin about the harassment at my workplace and included a statement from my graduate department confirming the disruption to my studies. But the most powerful part was when Rebecca had asked Mom for comment. She'd actually agreed to an on-camera interview, probably thinking she could spin the narrative back in their favor. It backfired spectacularly. We love Sarah very much, Mom had said, tears in her eyes. We're just worried about her mental health. She's always been sensitive, and she's blown a few forgotten birthdays out of proportion. According to our investigation, Sarah's birthday was overlooked 4 years in a row, including this year when you purchased a motorcycle for your other daughter on Sarah's birthday, Rebecca had responded. How do you respond to the documentation Sarah provided showing consistent patterns of exclusion? Every family goes through rough patches, Mom had replied. Sarah is making this out to be worse than it was. We celebrated her plenty of times. Can you provide any documentation of birthday celebrations for Sarah in the past 4 years? The silence on camera was devastating. The story went viral locally, then regionally, then nationally. #birthday boycott started trending on TikTok. The screenshots Rebecca had shown were shared thousands of times. Someone even created a side-by-side comparison video showing Emma's elaborate celebrations next to my parents' complete social media silence on my birthdays. The virality of the story created some unexpected complications in my daily life. Within 48 hours of the story airing, my social media accounts were flooded with friend requests and messages from strangers. Even though my accounts were private, people were finding ways to reach out, through LinkedIn, through mutual friends, even through the contact forms on websites where I'd previously done freelance tutoring. Most of the messages were supportive, but the sheer volume was overwhelming. I was getting hundreds of notifications a day from people sharing their own family stories, offering support, or just expressing outrage on my behalf. The attention also meant I was being recognized in public. The first time it happened, I was at the grocery store when a woman approached me in the cereal aisle. Excuse me, are you Sarah? From the news story about the birthdays? I froze, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to deny it, to maintain my privacy, but another part of me was curious about what she wanted to say. Yes, I said cautiously. Her eyes filled with tears. I just wanted to thank you for speaking out. My parents did something similar to me, not birthdays, but they consistently chose my brother over me for everything. I cut contact 5 years ago, and I've been questioning myself ever since, wondering if I was overreacting. Seeing your story, seeing that documentation you provided, it helped me realize I wasn't crazy. She reached out and squeezed my hand. You gave me permission to stop doubting myself. That interaction was repeated dozens of times over the following weeks. At the coffee shop, at the university, even at the post office, people kept approaching me with their own stories of family neglect and validation that my experience resonated with them. But not all the attention was positive. About a week after the story aired, I started receiving negative messages too. Most were from people defending family values and criticizing me for airing dirty laundry in public or being ungrateful to parents who did their best. The worst was a voicemail left on my work phone at the tutoring center. You're a spoiled brat who destroyed your family over a few missed birthdays. Your parents should have cut you off years ago instead of wasting their money on an ungrateful daughter. People like you are what's wrong with this generation. Kevin at the coffee shop got similar calls, with people demanding that he fire me for being a family destroyer and bad for business. Fortunately, Kevin saw the irony in strangers harassing him about my family supposedly harassing me, and he refused to be intimidated. The negative attention made me second-guess my decision to go public. During one particularly difficult day when I'd received a dozen hateful messages, I called Dr. Peterson in tears. I'm wondering if I made a mistake, I told her. Maybe I should have just stayed quiet and dealt with this privately. Now there are strangers on the internet calling me horrible names, and I feel like I've made everything worse. Sarah, Dr. Peterson said gently, the people criticizing you are revealing more about themselves than about you. Anyone who can look at 4 years of documented birthday exclusion and call you spoiled for being hurt by it is someone who either hasn't examined their own family dynamics or is defending their own problematic behavior. She helped me understand that the negative responses were actually validating the importance of speaking out. The reason your story is triggering such strong reactions is because it's forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths about family dynamics. The people who are angry at you aren't really angry at you, they're angry at having their worldview challenged. But Dr. Peterson also helped me set boundaries around the attention. We worked on strategies for managing the overwhelming response, including setting up separate email accounts for story-related contact and creating scripts for how to respond when people approach me in public. Most importantly, she helped me focus on why I'd chosen to tell my story in the first place. You didn't go public for revenge, she reminded me. You went public to reclaim your narrative and to stop your family from controlling the story about who you are. The fact that your story is helping other people is a bonus, but it wasn't the primary goal. The online attention also revealed something interesting about Emma's response to the situation. While my parents had largely gone quiet on social media after the story aired, Emma seemed unable to resist engaging with the conversation online. I wasn't following her accounts directly, but friends sent me screenshots of posts she'd made on Instagram and TikTok that seemed designed to generate sympathy without directly addressing the situation. She posted a photo of herself crying with a caption, "Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most. Sending love to anyone dealing with family struggles right now, broken heart emoji." Another post showed her looking contemplative at sunset with the text, "Learning that you can't control other people's narratives, only your own truth. Growth is painful but necessary," sunrise emoji. The comments on these posts were brutal. People had clearly connected them to my story and weren't buying Emma's victim narrative. Comments ranged from "maybe try acknowledging your sister exists" to "your truth is pretty well documented in those birthday posts" to simply dozens of birthday cake emojis. Emma ended up deleting both posts within 24 hours, but not before screenshots were taken and shared in the Facebook groups that had formed around my story. The most telling response came when someone found Emma's old YouTube channel, where she posted vlogs about family life over the years. People went through the videos systematically, noting every time she mentioned family celebrations, holidays, or achievements, and pointing out that I was never mentioned once in over 50 videos spanning 3 years. One commenter created a timestamp document showing every celebration Emma had documented: birthday dinner for Emma, 1523, Emma's soccer championship, 8:45, Emma's graduation party, 2217, Emma's internship celebration, 11:30. The list went on for pages, and my name appeared exactly 0 times. The systematic nature of my exclusion, when laid out chronologically through Emma's own documentation, was more damning than anything I could have said myself. But the real shock came from the response. My story had struck a nerve with people who'd experienced similar family dynamics. The comments poured in, hundreds, then thousands of people sharing their own stories of being the forgotten child, the scapegoat, the invisible family member. More importantly, people in my community recognized my family. Emma's travel blog, which had been struggling with fewer than 500 followers, was flooded with comments. People calling her out for being a spoiled brat, for allowing her parents to treat me that way, for participating in the harassment campaign. My parents' social media accounts were found and flooded with negative comments. Mom had to make her Facebook private after people started commenting on every post with birthday cake emojis and questions about where I was in family photos. Dad's LinkedIn, He was a regional sales manager for a tech company, got so many negative comments that his company's HR department reached out to him about the social media situation affecting the company's image. But the most dramatic response came from somewhere I never expected, our extended family. I hadn't heard from my mom's sister Janet in years. She'd moved to Oregon when I was in high school, and we'd lost touch. But she saw the news story. She called me the day after it aired. "Sarah? This is your Aunt Janet? I saw the news, and I need you to know something." She told me that she'd been wondering for years why I was never mentioned in family updates. Every time she called Mom or saw their Facebook posts, it was all Emma, all the time. When she'd asked about me, Mom would give vague responses about how I was doing fine or keeping busy with school. "I thought maybe you were just private, didn't like social media," Janet said. "I had no idea they were completely ignoring you." Then she told me something that made my blood run cold. "Sarah, this isn't new. Your mom did the same thing to her younger brother, your Uncle Mike. He was the quiet one, never caused trouble, got decent grades. But your grandfather always favored your mom, and she learned to get attention by being dramatic and demanding. Mike was forgotten in all the chaos." "What happened to Uncle Mike?" "He cut contact with the family when he was 25. Your mom told everyone he was mentally unstable and turned his back on family. She made him out to be the villain. I believed her for years because I was young and didn't understand the dynamics. Mike tried to reach out to me once, to explain his side, but I didn't listen." Janet's voice broke. "He died in a car accident 10 years ago. I never got to apologize to him or hear his story. When I saw what your parents were doing to you, the same pattern, the same lies, I knew I couldn't stay silent." That's when she dropped the real bombshell. "Sarah, I kept some of Mike's things after he died, including journals and letters he wrote but never sent. He documented everything your mom did to him, just like you documented what your parents did to you. And I have photos from family gatherings where Mike was clearly excluded, just like they excluded you." She paused. "Would you like me to scan them and send them to you? I think it's time the family's pattern of scapegoating got exposed." 2 days later, my email was full of scanned documents that painted a picture of generational family dysfunction. Uncle Mike's journals described the same patterns I'd experienced: forgotten birthdays, being excluded from celebrations, being gaslighted when he tried to address the problems. But there was more. Janet had also sent me photos from family gatherings from the 1980s and 1990s. In every single family photo, Uncle Mike was either absent or positioned at the very edge of the group, often partially cut off. In celebration photos, he was never the center of attention, never had anyone's arm around him, never looked genuinely happy. It was like looking at my own childhood through a different lens. I forwarded everything to Rebecca, who was already working on a follow-up story about the public response to the first piece. This new information turned it into something much bigger. The second story ran the following week. Family's pattern of scapegoating spans generations. Deceased uncle's journals reveal similar treatment. This time, it wasn't just local news. National media picked it up. The story touched on generational trauma, family scapegoating, and the long-term psychological effects of emotional neglect. The national attention brought an entirely different level of scrutiny and support. I started receiving emails from journalists across the country wanting to do follow-up interviews. Producers from daytime talk shows reached out asking if I'd be willing to appear on their programs to discuss family estrangement. A literary agent contacted me suggesting I write a book about my experience. "Stories like yours are incredibly important," she wrote. "There are millions of people dealing with similar family dynamics who need to see that they're not alone and that it's possible to break these cycles." The idea of writing a book was both terrifying and appealing. On one hand, it would mean continuing to live in the public eye and potentially dealing with more negative attention. On the other hand, it would give me the opportunity to tell my story in depth and potentially help even more people. But the most unexpected contact came from Dr. Angela Foster, a psychology professor at Northwestern University who specialized in family systems and generational trauma. "Sarah," she said when she called, "I've been researching family scapegoating patterns for over 20 years, and your story, combined with your uncle's documentation, represents one of the most clear-cut examples of generational pattern repetition I've ever encountered. Would you be interested in contributing to my research?" She explained that she was working on a longitudinal study about how scapegoating patterns repeat across generations and how they can be interrupted. "Your family's pattern is textbook, but what's unique is that you have documentation spanning 2 generations. Your uncle's journals and your own records create an unprecedented window into how these dynamics perpetuate themselves." The idea of turning my painful experience into something that could contribute to academic understanding was appealing. Dr. Foster assured me that any research participation would be completely confidential and that I would have input on how the findings were presented. "One of the biggest challenges in studying family scapegoating is that the patterns are often hidden within family systems," she explained. "Victims are taught to minimize their experiences or blame themselves, and families present a different narrative to the outside world. Your case is unusual because the pattern became publicly visible, which gives us insights we rarely get to see." I agreed to participate in her research, partly because I wanted to contribute to understanding these dynamics, but mostly because I wanted my experience to serve some larger purpose beyond just my own healing. Dr. Foster's preliminary analysis revealed some fascinating patterns. She found that my mother's treatment of Uncle Mike and her treatment of me followed almost identical trajectories: initial favoritism toward a charismatic sibling, gradual marginalization of the quieter child, escalation of exclusion around major family events, and finally, character assassination when the scapegoat tried to address the problems. What's particularly interesting, Dr. Foster told me during one of our interviews, is how your mother seemed to unconsciously recreate the family dynamic she grew up in, but cast herself in the role of the favored child rather than the scapegoat. She became what her father was to her brother, the parent who actively participated in marginalizing a family member. This insight helped me understand something I'd never been able to articulate before: my mother wasn't just neglecting me out of indifference. She was actively recreating a family dynamic that felt normal to her, even though it had caused tremendous pain to her own brother. Families are systems, Dr. Foster explained. When someone grows up in a dysfunctional system, they often recreate that same dysfunction in the next generation, even if they were the victim of it themselves. Your mother learned that families have a good child and a problem child, and she made sure Emma was positioned as the good child, which automatically cast you in the role of the problem child. The research sessions were both illuminating and emotionally difficult. Going through my documentation with a trained researcher meant examining patterns I'd been too close to see clearly. Dr. Foster showed me how my parents' exclusion of me had actually escalated over time in response to my achievements. "Look at this timeline," she said, pointing to a chart she'd created. "Your academic honors, your job promotions, your graduate school acceptance, they're all followed within weeks by major celebrations for Emma that excluded you." She theorized that my successes were threatening to the family narrative that positioned Emma as the achiever and me as the problem. Rather than celebrating your accomplishments, which would have disrupted their established roles, your parents unconsciously escalated Emma's celebrations to maintain the hierarchy. This explanation helped me understand why my birthday exclusions had gotten worse over time rather than better. I'd always assumed that if I just achieved more, worked harder, or caused fewer problems, my parents would eventually notice and value me. But Dr. Foster's analysis suggested the opposite: the more I achieved, the more threatening I became to the family system, and the more actively they worked to marginalize me. Dr. Peterson was interviewed as an expert on family dynamics, with my permission, and she explained the psychological patterns that create scapegoats within families. "What we see here is a pattern that often repeats across generations," she said. Families develop systems where one member is consistently marginalized, and that marginalization is then justified through narratives that paint the victim as too sensitive, dramatic, or mentally unstable. These patterns don't just damage the immediate victim, they affect the entire family system. The response was overwhelming. My story became a touchstone for discussions about family trauma and the myth of their family as justification for abuse. But more practically, the attention had real consequences for my parents. Dad's company, already concerned about the social media attention, placed him on administrative leave while they assessed the situation. Apparently, several major clients had seen the stories and expressed concerns about working with someone who was portrayed as emotionally abusive. Mom lost 2 freelance marketing contracts after clients saw her name associated with the story. Emma's travel blog sponsor dropped her, citing negative publicity and brand image concerns. The harassment stopped completely. But the most satisfying response came from people I'd never expected to hear from. My high school English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, reached out through LinkedIn. She'd seen the story and remembered me as a bright, quiet student who seemed to carry a heavy burden. She told me she'd always wondered why my parents never came to award ceremonies when I won academic honors, while they were front row for every one of Emma's soccer games. 3 of my college friends messaged me to say they'd always thought my family dynamics seemed off but hadn't wanted to say anything. They shared specific memories of times when my family had excluded me from conversations or celebrations, moments I'd forgotten or convinced myself were normal. Even people from my current graduate program reached out. Classmates told me they'd noticed I never talked about my family and had wondered if something was wrong. The validation was overwhelming and healing in ways I hadn't expected. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from other forgotten children. I received hundreds of emails and messages from people sharing their own stories. People who'd experienced similar birthday boycotts, exclusion from family celebrations, or being painted as the problem child when they tried to address legitimate grievances. Many of them said my story gave them permission to acknowledge their own experiences and set their own boundaries. I started a private Facebook group called Forgotten Family Members that now has over 3,000 members. It's become a support network for people dealing with family scapegoating, and several mental health professionals have joined as resources. As for my family, they tried one last manipulation tactic. 3 weeks after the second story aired, I received a certified letter from a law office. My parents were threatening to sue me for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, claiming I had destroyed their reputations with false accusations. I forwarded a letter to the lawyer Rebecca had connected me with, one who specialized in media law and had offered to help me pro bono after seeing my story. She laughed when she read it. "Sarah, They documented their own behavior, she said. Everything you shared was either your own experiences or documentation they themselves posted on social media. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Plus, the harassment campaign they launched against you is actually grounds for you to sue them. She sent a response letter pointing out that not only did they have no case, but that their harassment campaign was well documented and could result in criminal charges if it continued. I never heard from their lawyer again. It's been 6 months since I cut contact, and my life has completely transformed. I finished my thesis and graduated with honors. The stress of dealing with family dysfunction had been affecting my academic performance more than I'd realized. Without that constant emotional drain, my focus and productivity increased dramatically. I got a full-time position as a research coordinator at the university, with excellent benefits and the opportunity to continue toward my PhD if I choose. I'm dating someone now, a fellow graduate student named Alex who I met in the support group. He's working through his own family trauma, and we understand each other in ways I never thought possible. Most importantly, I've learned what healthy relationships look like. The support group has become like a chosen family. We celebrate each other's birthdays, achievements, and milestones. I've learned what it feels like to have people show up for you consistently. My 25th birthday was last month. The support group threw me a surprise party. Alex made me a cake from scratch. My landlord, who'd become a friend after the media attention, brought me flowers. Even Kevin from the coffee shop stopped by with a card. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely celebrated. As for my parents and Emma, they've slowly faded from the public eye. Dad eventually returned to work but took a demotion. Mom's social media presence is minimal now. She learned the hard way that playing victim publicly can backfire spectacularly. Emma moved to another state, claiming she wanted a fresh start for her travel blog. According to mutual friends, she struggled to rebuild her online presence and has had to get a regular job. I don't wish them ill, but I don't miss them either. Dr. Peterson helped me understand that loving someone doesn't mean accepting abuse from them, and that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for everyone involved is to walk away. The restraining order is still in effect, though they haven't tried to contact me since the legal letter. I suspect they finally understood that the situation they'd created was irreversible. Sometimes people ask if I regret going public with my story. The answer is absolutely not. Going public wasn't revenge, it was reclaiming my narrative. For years, they'd controlled the story about our family, about who I was, about why our relationships were broken. They painted me as dramatic, unstable, ungrateful. When they tried to preemptively control the narrative by launching their social media campaign, they gave me the opening to tell the truth. The consequences they faced weren't punishment I orchestrated, they were the natural results of their own actions being exposed to public scrutiny. The birthday boycotts, the harassment campaign, the attempts to damage my reputation at school and work, all of that was their choice. I simply stopped protecting them from the consequences of those choices. The most unexpected gift from this whole experience has been learning that I'm not alone. The forgotten children are everywhere, we just don't talk about it because we've been conditioned to protect the family narrative and blame ourselves for the dysfunction. But when we do talk about it, when we stop carrying the family secrets and start speaking our truth, we discover that the problem was never us. I'm still in therapy, still working through the layers of trauma that come from a childhood of systematic exclusion. But I'm doing it surrounded by people who value me, celebrate me, and show up for me consistently. My next birthday will be my second annual chosen family birthday party. I'm already planning it, because I've learned that celebrating yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And I've learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well, being loved, and refusing to carry other people's dysfunction anymore. For anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, you deserve better. You deserve to be celebrated. You deserve relationships where you don't have to constantly prove your worth. And if your family can't provide that, you have the right to find people who will. The forgotten children deserve to be remembered, and we don't need anyone's permission to finally put ourselves first. Update: it's been a year now, and I wanted to add this. Emma reached out to me last month through a mutual friend. She wanted to apologize and explain. I declined. Some bridges, once burned, are meant to stay that way. But I did send her a message through the friend. I hope you've learned to value the people in your life while you have them, instead of taking them for granted until they're gone. I hear she cried when she received it. Part of me feels sad about that, because I remember the little sister who used to follow me around and copy everything I did. But that little sister grew up into someone who stood by and watched while her parents forgot I existed, year after year, and only spoke up when there were consequences for her. Some apologies come too late. The good news is that I've learned I don't need her apology to heal. I don't need any of them to acknowledge what they did for me to know it happened and to know it wasn't okay. I needed their acknowledgement when I was still fighting for scraps of their attention. But I don't need anything from them anymore. And that, I think, is the real victory.